Well, accusations of sponsoring terror seem to have become common among Middle Eastern countries. The longest and loudest such blame game has been between two of the region's biggest players, Iran and Saudi Arabia. Well, in January last year, the Saudi embassy in Iran was set on fire amid violent protests after the Arab state executed a prominent Shia cleric accusing him of terrorism. Later that month, Iran said its embassy in Yemen was hit by a Saudi airstrike. Iran and Saudi Arabia support opposing sides in the civil war there. Well, Iran also accused Saudi Arabia of being behind the deadly terror attacks that had killed 18 people in Tehran 2 weeks ago. Saudi Arabia denies the accusations. And in the most recent development, Saudi Arabia detained 3 Iranian citizens, claiming they're members of Iran's armed forces, something Iran has denied. Well, the official rhetoric between the two states has also repeatedly been tense.
The Iranian regime's aggressive policies in the region aim to undermine security and spread strife and wars.
Saudi Arabia is a country where I don't think the word election has any meaning. They've never seen a ballot box.
Saudis kill the children and destroy the houses, infrastructure and national resources of Yemen. This is a serious crime.
We would welcome the opportunity to see Iran act like a normal country, to be a peaceful country, to not interfere in the affairs of the countries of the region, and to not support terrorism.
Well, to discuss this further, we're joined by political analyst Mohammad Marandi from Tehran, and also by Abdulateef Al Mulhim, who's a retired Commodore from the Royal Saudi Navy. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. If I can start with you, Saeed. Well, both countries have been accusing each other of supporting terror. Well, how justified are these accusations?
Well, the problem with the Saudi regime is that it has been doing this since the early 1980s, when they were supporting extremist groups in Afghanistan with U.S. support. And the rise of Wahhabism is something that came from Saudi Arabia. It was originally a very small, obscure sect in Najd, but because of the oil wealth of the Saudi regime, it's been spreading across the world through the Saudi government. And we now see that regardless of what's happened in Yemen and in Syria and in Libya, we've seen that ideologies like ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, all of them get their religious beliefs from the Saudis. They're Wahhabi groups. And we know that, for example, German intelligence now says that the Saudis are supporting extremist groups in Germany. And the Deputy Chancellor of Germany also said that the Saudis are spreading extremism. So traditional allies of the Saudis, they are now becoming more and more concerned about the spread of this extremism, which we see manifesting itself in Europe, in the Philippines, in Africa.
Well, Abdulateef, what do you think to that? How do you respond to that?
First of all, hello everybody. And first of all, Saudi Arabia and Saudis don't have anything against the Iranian people. And as a matter of fact, we think Iran is very rich in natural resources. They have very rich heritage. They have very hard-working people. And until 1979, things were fine between the two countries. And it really surprised us after the Iranian Revolution, when the late Ayatollah Khomeini took power. We expected him to be actually his main purpose is overthrowing the Shah, is to build Iran and to make it safe and prosperous for their own people. But the first thing that the Iranians did in 1979 was their declaration of spreading and extending their revolution rhetoric to the Arab world, especially the Gulf states. And this is why most of the Iranian educated are not in Tehran, but they are in the United States and Canada and Europe. And one thing we have to note that we receive hundreds of thousands of Iranians as pilgrimage or Umrah every year, and we have nothing against, as I said, against their own people. Iranian Revolution started with actually overtaking the American embassy for 444 days in a move that is, a protected area that should be respected according to international law. And Iran didn't stop at that, but they overtook, they attacked Saudi embassy, British embassy. I'm sorry?
I was going to say, please carry on. Please. Abdulateef,
yes, what I was saying.
And there are more than one. Even Western embassies were overtaken and attacked by Iran. Also, there are many cases, not even in this area, as far as Argentina, when in 1994 there was a big explosion in one of the main places in Buenos Aires that claimed tens of lives. So I don't know what if we go back and forth accusing each other, we will take all day. But there we have facts that are being documented not only in Saudi Arabia but with the international community.
Okay, Saeed, I could see that you were smiling when you were responding to some of those things and you're keen to get in. So if you can respond to that, but also there's a key point here. Is Iran interested in easing the tensions, and do you think it's doing enough to ease them?
I couldn't hear your question, but let me, if possible, I'll respond to what he said. First of all, I mean, I think it's quite clear to your audience where Saudi Arabia stands and where Iran stands. After the revolution, the problem that was created between Iran and Saudi Arabia is that the Saudi Arabian regime, like other regimes, they were fearful of revolutions in their own country because they're dictatorships. In Iran, we've had elections since the revolution. Presidents, the leaders elected through a council that's elected by the people, the president, the parliament, the councils. Saudi Arabia is a dictatorship. It's a family that doesn't even tolerate itself. The crown prince was just kicked out of office today by the king, and he put his son in his place.
Why the Iranian elite are outside Iran?
And then, in addition to that, excuse me if you would allow me to continue. The Saudi regime supported Saddam Hussein after the revolution, which invaded Iran. I think your guest should look at history, and then I think if we had a discussion, it would go better. We would move forward more easily because the facts are there for everyone to see. We had 8 years of war with Saddam Hussein. He initiated the war. The Saudi regime provided him with up to $200 billion, helped him obtain chemical weapons from Western governments. And that's a stated fact. So with regards to pilgrimage, of course, the Saudis have a history of killing Iranians. Just 2 years ago, the Saudis killed 600 Iranian pilgrims and never even expressed remorse or regret. But most importantly is the Saudi regime, being inherently weak, is completely reliant on the United States. And so really the biggest blame goes to the United States. What happened in Libya couldn't have happened without the United States. What happened in Syria, the extremism that the Saudis and the Qataris and the others exported, couldn't have happened without the United States. But now we see in Yemen, the head of Al-Qaeda in Yemen says our forces are fighting alongside the Saudi-backed forces in Yemen. So we know that Al-Qaeda is itself saying that we're working alongside them in Yemen. In Syria, we all know the story. We know the Defense Intelligence Agency document of 2012 where the United States admitted that the Saudis and others were supporting the extremists, and then the United States supported them. We know in Iraq, the Saudis supported ISIS, but now we see that the Saudis, not only do they blockade Yemen and force people in Yemen to die of hunger, but they're even doing it to Qatar. Qatar, which until a few days ago was working alongside Saudi Arabia, now they've blockaded Qatar. They prevent food from getting into the country. This is how bizarre the Saudi regime behaves. We know the ISIS, where its ideology comes from. We know Al-Qaeda, where its ideology comes from. We know the books that they teach come from Saudi Arabia. We know that the bomb attacks in Europe, across Europe, in Asia, in Africa.
Why does ISIS attack Saudi Arabia, but it doesn't attack Iran?
All of these are linked to Wahhabism. All of them are linked. And the attack in Iran, it's a good thing that you raised the attack in Tehran. The Al-Qaeda, the ISIS attack in Iran was carried out with the support, according to the Iranian intelligence, was carried out with the support of the Saudi regime. And I think the new Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, should take care because Saudi Arabia is a country that is running out of money like there's no tomorrow. It has lost the war in Yemen. It cannot even defeat Doha.
Okay, Saeed, coming in there then, Abdulateef, there's a lot of accusations here. Let Abdulateef respond to some of those things. The accusation of the dire humanitarian situation in Yemen, the military campaign there. I mean, Abdulateef, was the campaign justified? Was Iran wrong when it opposed the move? How do you respond to his comments?
First of all, regarding his talk about Saudi Arabia is not as isolated and being technically isolated by the whole world, because technically it acted as an outlaw state when they acted in, for example, in Lebanon. What does Hezbollah is doing in Lebanon, being supported by Iran and being a country or government and a military force within a military force in Lebanon, and their interference in Bahrain, which they still consider part of Iran.
That's one thing. Second thing, they're
overtaking Iraq. I mean, they are technically ruling Iraq right now, and their interference in Syria. As far as Yemen is bordering Saudi Arabia with about 800 miles. I'm not finished. By the way, Al Qaeda and ISIS never attacked Iran. Can you explain why doesn't ISIS attack Iran, but they have attacked? Al Qaeda attacked Saudi Arabia and many terrorist acts many times. Now we come to Yemen. Saudi Arabia and Yemen share hundreds or 1,000 miles of borders, and the Al Houthis, which is supported by Iran and being supplied by very lethal weapons like the Scud missiles, supported by Iran and given to the Houthis by Iran, and they are threatening the borders just like they did like a few years ago. And when they attacked Saudi Arabia at that time, we actually retaliated.
You're not even allowing food to get into the country. How could such weapons be sent to Yemen?
No. Sorry.
You don't even allow food to get into the people in Yemen are dying of starvation.
You don't read the news.
And then you have the audacity to say that ISIS doesn't attack Iran when it just attacked Iran a couple of weeks ago.
You don't read the news.
You seem to be upset that it's failed in its many attacks against the country.
Okay, let him answer. Abdulateef, please answer. Please answer.
Now, during the start of the, by the way, we really never wanted the war in Yemen. We never wanted to be in a conflict with the neighboring. Believe it or not, Saudi Arabia for many decades have supported Yemen and the Yemenis with tens of billions of dollars of direct aid and infrastructure, building roads and hospitals. Now, from the day we started the war, we want to stop the war immediately, and we have given them a lot of financial aids. Even there was a war going on with Yemen. We never wanted the war, but we noted there is a threat to Saudi Arabia from the south, and we cannot keep silent at a time when the Houthis are in possession of weapons like Scud missiles, which had been fired at Saudi Arabian towns, even deep inside the kingdom. Saudi Arabia has the right and reserves the right to.
The problem is that you live in an alternative universe.
Iran is interfering in every way.
And that in Yemen, the Saudis have destroyed the hospitals. They've bombed weddings. They've bombed funerals. They've bombed schools.
Because
you've used cluster weapons that were provided to your regime by the British, the Canadians, the Americans. You've been committing crimes against humanity, against the people of Yemen for 2.5 years, and then you justify it?
But
people in Yemen are dying of cholera. They're dying of hunger.
If Iran,
after 2.5 years, if you had the support of the Yemeni people, you would have been able to take the capital Sana'a.
We're going round in a circle here. Can I just stop you there a second?
Because you've been defeated.
Saeed, let me just come to you then. I mean, I can see we're going in circles here. Effectively, let's look at it. You're arguing amongst yourselves, but do you think that there could be compromise between the two countries if there weren't any outside influences, if there weren't any outside countries? Do you think you could compromise? And do you think that there are these outside influences? And which countries are they? Which countries are interfering in this particular relationship? Saeed, what do you think?
Well, as I said before, the Saudi regime is not a very powerful regime. It's basically in alliance with the United States, it's in alliance with a number of smaller countries in the region, and with the Israeli regime. And the mistakes that the Saudis are making one after another in Libya, in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen, in Qatar, These are mistakes that when one looks at it, it seems as if this country is out of control, that the people in charge simply don't know what they're doing. If the Saudi regime is willing to be more sensible, is willing to come to some sort of agreement with Iran or with its other neighbors, obviously the Iranians would welcome that. When the Saudi king went to China, the Chinese offered to mediate, and the Iranians said fine, and then the Saudis said under no circumstances. But let's look at Qatar. The Qatari government is a government that has been, it is also, there are only two Wahhabi governments in the world, regimes in the world, Qatar and the Saudi regime. These are the two Wahhabi governments. They work together in different parts of the world, and they both promoted extremism, but now the Saudis won't even tolerate Qatar. So when the Saudis don't tolerate Qatar, when they impose hunger on Yemen, when they destroy Syria with extremists like Al-Qaeda and ISIS, we know from the WikiLeaks documents that Hillary Clinton knew that the Saudis and the Qataris up to 2014 were both funding ISIS. We know what the Saudis did in Libya. So when the Saudis behave as such, it's very difficult to find a solution. But at the end of the day, the Saudis will have to come to an agreement with Iran and other regional countries, but because it is running out of money, because the Saudis have failed in Yemen. They've failed in the war
very
against the
briefly then,
Yemeni people.
if you can just get Abdulateef to respond to that, then how do you respond to that?
Yes. Saudi Arabia is one of the G20 countries and has one of the most stable economy and one of the stable governments, not only in the region, in the whole world. And there is a solid unity between the ruler and the ruled in Saudi Arabia. This is why you see the Saudis in Saudi Arabia. At a time, you see the Iranian elite are living outside Iran, and Iranians are fleeing Iran. They are leaving from their own country.
The
Saudi
Iranians
Arabia, we give tens of
the Iranians have a military industry.
As we get into the nitty-gritty of the argument, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. Saeed Mohammad Marandi from Tehran and Abdulateef Al Mulhim, retired Commodore from the Royal Saudi Navy. We could talk all day, but we have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Thank you.